Why, hello there. So today I want to talk about being disabled in Japan, which is a little bit more of a serious topic than I usually cover on this channel. I wasn't sure if I was going to make this video at all, but the reason that I decided to was because this was the thing that I was the most concerned about before moving here and even when I first moved here. And it was also the thing that was the most difficult to find any kind of information on. So I really want to add to the very small information pool in the hopes that I can help someone else in a similar situation. So with that being said, let's get started. Hey, it's me again. I'm actually editing this video right now, and I realized it got a lot longer than I meant it to, so I'm sorry about that. But what I am going to do is put in some annotations around this kind of area so that you can skip to the part that you might be interested in, rather than listening to me ramble for a billion hours. First, I want to very briefly outline my own disability so that if you're in a similar situation, you can see the similarities and the differences between our conditions. So I have JRA, which stands for Juvenile Rheumatoid Arthritis. I won't spend terribly long on that right now because JRA manifests differently in everyone anyway, and there's just not much point going into too much detail here. However, the practical upshot of this is that I'm in varying amounts of pain every day, and I'm on one very expensive medication and several other medications as well. Because of the very expensive medication, I'm also immune suppressed, which basically just means that I can get sick very easily, and very normal illnesses can be quite dangerous for me. The one other thing that it's important to note is that juvenile rheumatoid arthritis is basically invisible. So you can see my hands are pretty swollen. All my joints are like that and they're always like that. But to the average person, it's invisible. So I can't really speak to what it's like to have a visible disability or illness. So please bear that in mind. But yeah, that's me. Let's talk about what I expected before moving here. So basically I had two possibilities in mind. So I talked to a lot of people before moving. I talked to my specialist, I talked to my GP, I talked to the consular office of Japan and New Zealand, and I talked to anyone with an illness or disability I could think of about what to expect and what I could do once I got here. And no one was able to give me a clear answer. But the first option, the first possibility that I thought might happen came from my specialist, who said I would need to find another specialist in Japan and go to them for my prescriptions. I thought this seemed pretty likely. So I looked up specialists in Japan and I found a rheumatologist in Kyoto who seemed to be the closest to me, and I thought I would get a referral to them and then I would go from there and get prescriptions from them. The problem with this was that in New Zealand, I'm not sure how this works in other countries, I'm sorry, but in New Zealand, a specialist referral and getting on certain types of medication can take a long time and be quite a difficult process. Because in New Zealand my medication was entirely government funded, of course they want to make sure that you really need this super expensive medication. So I thought that it might take a very long time for me to get this referral, and I was worried that I might run out of my month's supply of medication in the meantime. So that was the first thing that I thought might happen. The second thing I thought might happen is that I would find out that my medication just wasn't available or was too expensive and I would have to return to New Zealand. So in my mind, it was a very real possibility that I would arrive here, stay for a month, find out that it was impossible for me to live here because it's impossible for me to live without my meds, and have to go home. So those were the two options that I had in mind. Now, yeah, I feel a bit silly now that I look back on it, but honestly, it was so difficult to find information, reliable information, and everyone was telling me different things, so I came up with the two ideas that I thought seemed the most likely. Yeah, we'll talk about how it really turned out next. One more thing about what I expected. So I read up on employee insurance in Japan, as I'm sure that you have too if you're thinking of moving here with an illness or disability. And I found out that employee insurance here entitles you to a 70% discount on any kind of medical cost. However, the caveat to that is that pre-existing conditions are not covered. So from everything that I could read, I figured that arthritis would definitely not be covered by employee insurance. Okay, that was the last thing. Okay, now let's talk about what actually happened when I first arrived here. So, of course, when you first arrive, everything will be super hectic and crazy, but your health is your priority. So, of course, I very quickly told my specialist about my condition and that I would need to see a GP and get a referral to a specialist. For reasons that would become clear later, she seemed very confused by this, but she did recommend a clinic in my area that I could go to. So for those of you who don't know, a clinic in Japan is a general practitioner elsewhere. It's just the term that they use here. So I went to this clinic. I went alone and I was pretty nervous because Lord knows medical Japanese is not my strong point. But I went and I was thinking that, well, I don't know what I was thinking, but basically I was expecting to need to get lots of tests done to make sure that I really had what I was saying that I had. And I was expecting then to get a long wait for a referral to a specialist. So I got called in by the doctor and I was clutching my little file of medical notes and my medical history. And I just sort of gave it to him and I was like, Kansetsu Mimachi, I have rheumatoid arthritis. And he looked through my notes for about 5 minutes. And then he said, do you need an injection today? And my medication is an injection, so I knew what he meant. And I was like, yes, because I just wasn't expecting that at all, but I was due for my medication that day, so I was like, sure, I mean, what's the harm, right? And out of this little fridge next to his desk, he pulls out my medication just out of this fridge and is like, okay, we'll give you your injection right now, and then I can prescribe you some more. And I was like, wait, you can? You can? So for reference, in New Zealand, my medication would never be available from a GP. And in fact, it's quite rare. So you would have to order it in at least a week in advance to be able to pick it up at a pharmacy. So that just really blew my mind. So I said yes, I did the injection. And then he asked for my employee insurance card, which is a little blue card that you'll get. It's very important. Take it everywhere. So I pulled it out and he was like, okay, so you can get the 70% discount on your medication. And I was like, I can? And I wasn't going to argue with him, obviously. So I was just like, okay, sure, that sounds great. And then he wrote me out a prescription for 4 lots of my injections and told me there's a pharmacy next door that I could go to and go pay for it and pick it up. The pharmacy had it in right then, which in New Zealand, just as I said, does not happen. The pharmacy had it in right then. I just went next door and picked it up and everything was fine. So basically, the only thing I needed to do was go to a GP in Japan. The whole process was just completely different from what it was like in New Zealand. And that's how I've been getting my medication ever since. I walk about 10 minutes to my clinic. I talk to my doctor. He checks out my hands and sometimes my ankles. He sometimes does x-rays. He does a blood test every month and goes through the results with me because it's all in Japanese and, as I said, medical Japanese, not my strong point, but he's kind enough to go through all that with me. And then he writes me a prescription. I go next door to the pharmacy, I pick up my meds, pay for them, and leave. So it was all ridiculously easy. Yeah. When I left the clinic, I remember just thinking, what? Like, what just happened? But obviously I was thrilled, and I still am. Like, every time I go to the clinic, and it's just every time so easy, I'm always still in a little bit of shock about it. So yeah, that's how it all ended up. Not either of the possibilities that I had in mind, but much, much better than both of them. Yeah, so I guess that's my story, which is quite specific to me, but I wanted to share it because I couldn't find anyone's story about what happened with their disability when they got here. So I wanted to share that. But now I would like to give a little bit more general advice that I hope will be useful to more people than my own experience and my own story. But yeah, that's how it all happened. Okay, time for some more general advice and not just me talking about myself. So, first thing is something that I touched on a little bit earlier, but I want to come back to, and that's the things that you should bring with you. So I brought 2 things to Japan related to my disability, and the first was my month's worth of medication. As I said, you will need to fill out a form for that, but it's nothing different or nothing too different from filling out a regular form for customs about your medication. So you shouldn't have any trouble with that. But do remember to do that. So I bought a month's worth of medication, and I also bought my folder with all of my medical history and a note from my specialist. Now, it turned out that I didn't need anything except for the condensed, like the sort of Cliff Notes version of my medical history from my specialist, but I would recommend bringing a copy of everything with you just in case. However, do get that Cliff Notes version of your med history from your specialist. Get a recent version. It's just really helpful to have all of that information in like a short paragraph. So yeah, those are the two things. I don't know, depending on your condition, of course, you might need more things, but those are the two things that I would not leave your country without. Okay, so that's the first thing. Number 2, communicating with medical professionals if you don't speak Japanese. So obviously the first thing that I would recommend is memorizing any important keywords or phrases related to your illness or condition. So that's super important, not only for communicating with medical professionals, but for communicating with anyone in Japan about your condition. Apart from that, in my experience, every medical professional that I've dealt with has had enough of a level of English that we can get by and communicate okay. So they do tend to learn, especially medically related English in med school. So I wouldn't honestly worry about that too much. You can have your little English to Japanese dictionary on your phone. You can use sign language, kind of like charades. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you do end up in trouble, I know that there are services that can help people with disabilities or illnesses to translate between their specialist and them. So if you do need that, then I know there are services like that available. I've never had to use one myself, so I'm not sure of the details, but it's definitely something that you can look into. Third, hospitals in Japan have opening hours. I'm not sure how this works everywhere in the world, but certainly this is the first country that I've been to where the hospitals close. So I wanted to mention this because I made the mistake of trying to go to a local hospital after hours and was very surprised to learn that it was all closed up. Of course, if you're in trouble, you can call an ambulance and they will take you to the nearest 24-hour hospital, but don't take it as a given that hospitals will be open all the time. Fourthly, if you have an autoimmune condition like me and are immune suppressed, be aware that even people with great immune systems tend to get sick when they move to a new country. And that's because their immune system isn't used to the new types of illnesses. So be a little bit aware in your first few months here and take extra care of yourself. I would also say that you might need to take extra care in the off seasons, which are autumn and spring. I found that the seasons and temperature changes incredibly fast here, and that tends to make me sick. In fact, every spring and autumn so far in Japan I've got sick, and it's just because I'm not used to that rapid of a change in temperature. So be aware of these things and just take extra care of yourself and listen to your body to see if you need to take it easy or maybe go to your clinic. Number 5. So what about dealing with Japanese coworkers and friends with regards to your disability or illness? Personally, I've always been very open with my condition, and if it comes up in conversation or if people ask about it, I will just say, yep, I have arthritis. And if they want to know any more, then I'm more than happy to tell them. So I've been treated with nothing but kindness and respect by my coworkers and friends. A lot of the time people will forget that I have arthritis because it is so nearly invisible. For example, the gym teachers sometimes ask me to play volleyball, and I'm like, have arthritis, but they're immediately just like, oh, sorry. And this happens everywhere. I mean, this is just a thing that happens with invisible illnesses. So yeah, nothing but kindness and respect to anyone who's ever found out. And yeah, of course, I tell people, and I want you to know that you shouldn't be afraid to tell people, but you should also know that on the flip side of that, you shouldn't feel pressured into telling people anything. If you don't want to disclose details or even that you have an illness, that's more than fine. You can put it on your work application and you can just never mention it again. In my experience, especially in the workplace, there's a very don't ask, don't tell kind of mentality in Japan. And even if someone asks you about, say you have a visible disability, even if someone asks you about that, you can just say that you don't want to talk about it, and that tends to be fine. So please be aware that whatever you want to do, however much or little information you want to give, that's totally fine. But in my experience, if you choose to have a full disclosure kind of attitude like me, I don't think you'll be treated any differently or worse. Yeah, I definitely haven't noticed that I've been treated any differently from anyone else. The one thing that I have had a little trouble adjusting to is the Japanese work ethic and how that relates to my disability. So in Japan, it's pretty much expected that you will go to work even if you're pretty sick. And that's not something I'm used to, because when I get sick, I really need to take care of myself and try to get better. And it can be a little bit dangerous to push myself too hard because of the whole immune suppressed thing. But in Japan, it's basically expected that you will be seen to be working hard even when you get sick. If you do need to take a day off for sick leave, you need to go to the doctor on that day. Regardless of how bad you feel, you need to go to the doctor on that day and get a doctor's note so that you can take sick leave rather than using up your yearly paid leave. So that's the one thing that I have had a bit of trouble with. But yeah, that's something to be aware of, just so that you know that that culture exists. Actually, there is one other very small negative that I just thought I'd mention because it exists, not because it really bothers me. So even with the 70% employee insurance discount, my medication still costs about $400 per month. So obviously I have to budget a little bit more carefully than other people. However, since it's what helps me survive, that's of course not really an issue to me. So yeah, two very small-ish negatives, one very small and one kind of medium-sized, and everything else has just been overwhelmingly positive. Apart from the work ethic thing, the end result of this video and what I want you to take away from it is that I love my life here, despite my illness, and I have nothing but good things to say about the way that I've been treated and the Japanese healthcare system. So I want you to know that if you want to move here or want to move anywhere and you're scared because of your illness, please, please, please just give it a go. I know it's really scary, and it's scary enough to move to a brand new country anyway, but please don't let your illness stop you. I know it can be very easy to become overwhelmed by it, but I love my life here. I love everything about it. I'm so glad that I did this. It's been such a learning experience. And if this is something that you want to do, I think you can do it. So that's about it for this video. I really hope this was helpful to you, and I'm sorry for rambling on for so long. This is just something that I think about a lot and that is quite a big part of my life. Obviously, if you have any questions at all, this is something I would love to help you with, so please ask in the comments, or you can message me privately about it. I don't mind at all. Yeah, any questions, any comments at all, I would love to hear. So yeah, that's about it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.